Facebook fans, thank you for joining us today. My name is Molly Koshina. I am the press attaché here at the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines. We are thrilled that you could be here with us for this very special U.S. Embassy Insider episode. Those of you on Facebook, be sure to remember, post your questions in the comments section. And if you're following us on Twitter, be sure to use the hashtag U.S. Embassy Insider with your questions and feedback. We really look forward to hearing from you. Today we have a very special guest in from Hawaii, the brand new commander of United States Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Davidson.
Hello,
Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Molly. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a long trip. We appreciate you coming to spend time with us here at the embassy and talk about the work that you're doing. Have you been to the Philippines before?
I have. Going back to my very first port visit on a U.S. Navy ship more than 35 years ago. And I've been probably a dozen times since.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the name of the ship that you were on when you first came?
It was the USS Badger. It was a long time ago.
In Subic Bay or Manila?
In Subic Bay.
Subic Bay. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
I know that all of our AFP friends are happy to have you in town as well. And you're in town for some really important talks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're here to work on collaboration on defense, security, humanitarian, disaster relief, cybersecurity, maritime domain awareness. That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's part of an annual rhythm that I have with General Galvez, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. And then it addresses all the topics that you just addressed. And it's done much to advance our relationship and show that we're demonstrable friends and allies.
Wow. I mean, it's obviously an important alliance, long relationship. You were here over 35 years ago. But why do you have this one meeting to talk about all of these things? Why once a year? Why one meeting?
Well, it addresses specifically all those topics. You know, we have hundreds of subject matter expert exchanges and training events every year. But to get the two leaders together to really solidify our plans going forward is important to do.
So this is the planning session.
And it's clinching the deal.
Signing the document.
Exactly.
Have you met General Galvez before?
Of course. He came to Hawaii just earlier this month, actually, for the Chiefs of Defense Conference that U.S. Indo-Pacific Command hosted for all the Chiefs of Defense across the region.
Oh, wow. And I would imagine you talked about a lot of the same issues then.
Quite a bit, but a much wider range of chiefs and a much broader range of topics.
For sure. So the U.S. recently renamed Pacific Command to the United States Indo-Pacific Command. Now, I don't know if your business card fits at all, because that is long, but can you talk me through that change a little bit?
It does. Secretary Mattis announced the change, actually the day of the change of command, on the 30th of May. And it's meant to more accurately describe the size, scope, and responsibilities of the old Pacific Command into the Indo-Pacific Command. As my predecessor used to say, the Indo-Pacific Command runs from Hollywood to Bollywood and penguins to polar bears, Antarctic to the Arctic. And Indo-Pacific actually more accurately describes precisely that region.
And it's funny, talking about Pacific, often it comes up why the United States, but we are a Pacific country as well. I think people forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our oldest treaty of amity goes back to Thailand, actually, in 1830. We have a profound amount of foreign direct investment in this region, and our alliance with the Philippines goes back over 70 years.
Yeah.
It's very, very important to consider that the United States itself is a Pacific nation, Pacific states, Hawaii, the compact states of Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Marshall Islands. We have broad and expansive security concerns here in the Pacific. We are indeed a Pacific nation.
Absolutely. And so it's wonderful to have you here to talk about next year's activities with the Philippines. I understand there are a couple really big activities every year. What are those? Can you tell us a little bit about?
We have two major exercises a year. One is going on right now, Kamadang, which happens in the fall specifically. It's mostly humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, as well as crisis response scenario. We have Marines on the ground actually here today and it's one of the two, as I mentioned. So the earlier one is Balikatan, which includes all of the armed forces of the Philippines, as well as all the armed forces that we have: soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, indeed DoD civilians even participate from the United States. And it's focused on every branch, and it's focused, it runs the gamut from humanitarian assistance all the way to the very highest warfare needs that both nations have.
Wow. That sounds like a lot to organize. Sounds like a lot of people.
It is, and it's one of the reasons that we're here for the MDV SEP.
Great. What do each of our militaries get out of these exercises?
Oh, well, one, it demonstrates to the region that we are indeed an alliance.
Mm-hmm.
It addresses our mutual security concerns, but it also is demonstrative of the U.S. Philippine relationship, not just as friends, but indeed as allies. And really, in the military terms that come from the big military dictionary, allies is the most profound relationship that we could have. We've spilled blood with each other in the past. And it's indeed, the basis of much of our relationship. But we also have profound diaspora. Filipinos in America and Americans here in the Philippines. That binds us together like friends like no others here in the Pacific.
Yeah, the people ties. But I think I'm not a military person, but I do feel the depth of the relationship between our two militaries. And like you said, spilling blood together, I guess that creates a different bond.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the history. I mean, look at, you've been here over a dozen times and you're back.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
That's right.
You mentioned humanitarian response, and Philippines recently actually just was hit by a typhoon. Yeah. It is the season. This is one of the most disaster-prone areas, one of the top countries for disasters, actually. Yeah. In the world. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to express my profound sympathies for those Filipino citizens lost in the typhoon. It's a tragedy. The Chiefs of Defense Conference in Hawaii that I mentioned just a minute ago, General Galvez was actually there as the storm departed Guam, actually, and was coming here to the Philippines. We actually spent quite a bit of time together looking at the weather and talking about what the potential response might be and whether any assistance might be needed from the United States. We talked about it a little bit more just this morning. And the incredible response of the Philippine nation to the typhoon up there was, I think, indicative of the care that the nation has and the advances it's made over the years from previous typhoons. And while each and every one of them is tragic, the reduced number of deaths here in this typhoon, I think, reflects those lessons learned over the years.
Yeah, wow. That's, I guess, part of the training, yeah? To know how to respond when you have to.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you mentioned you're going to talk about is counterterrorism. Of course, the AFP is still working hard down in Mindanao. Does the United States still support counterterrorism efforts?
Of course. Actually, we have for a number of years. But our advice and assistance mission to the armed forces of the Philippines goes on down in Marawi, and we continue to provide intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support.
That's an important area for stability for the region.
Very well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the region, what about the South China Sea? What is happening in the South China Sea?
Well, I think everyone would note that the Chinese have been militarizing outposts in the South China Sea. It threatens the sovereignty of several nations around the South China Sea. It has the potential to limit the free flow of trade and goods. And I think it's indicative of the kind of threat that's posed actually here in the region. The United States and the Philippines are talking about that threat, and the United States is with many nations around the region.
Okay. freedom of operation, freedom of navigation operations continue?
By the United States, absolutely, and other nations.
Okay.
You may have noticed that just recently the United States and Japan were operating in the South China Sea together. And just in the last few days, Australia has transited the South China Sea as well as the United States.
Now, do freedom of navigation operations only happen in the South China Sea?
No, actually, the United States does them all over the world. We do them with our friends, and indeed all nations that have maritime borders. We think it's important to assert the freedoms that all nations enjoy at sea.
And so around the world, not just here.
Absolutely.
And it's important to protect for everyone's
Yes.
transit.
Yes.
Well, one of the things we think about is the transit, the commerce that goes through the South China Sea. That is an important thing to protect for all citizens, consumers of goods in this whole area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not just one aspect. There are many aspects of it.
Yeah. No, the free flow of trades and goods is important to the prosperity of every nation, not just here in the South China Sea, but indeed all the way around the world.
All the way around the world. Interesting. Well, the embassy, I'm sure you've heard, we like to talk about the U.S. and the Philippines being friends, partners, and allies. And we use that a lot to try and describe the relationship. So for us, that's kind of the best way to say what we are and what we're here doing. Could you tell us what that means to you?
Well, I made mention earlier. I think the friends and allies term is one that I could only attribute to the U.S. Philippine relationship. As I mentioned, we've been allies for years, and the depth of friendship that goes back, the number of Filipino Americans in America, the number of Filipino Americans that are here in the Philippines as well, our mutual business concerns, and you know what, our two democracies, free citizens that elect their governments, governments that feel accountable to their people. That binds us together like no other nations here in the Indo-Pacific.
Boy, does it. Wow. Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. We've run out of time. Unfortunately, I have a ton more questions as I have more cards, but unfortunately we are out of time today. I know you have a busy schedule. Thank you so much for your time, for talking with us, and for sharing your perspective all the way from Hawaii. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to meet you, Molly. Thank you.
Facebook fans, thank you for joining us. We look forward to you tuning in for next month's Embassy Insider. We look forward to hearing from you. Do you have any questions, anything we can follow up on? Be sure to place your comments down below, and we will stay in touch. Thanks a lot. Bye.